Okay. Well, welcome everyone to this historic tax credit webinar. I hope that you get a lot out of this evening, and I will try to keep it to about an hour, and that will include a question and answer at the end. But I will start off introducing myself. I'm Megan Hilliard. I'm the Director of Preservation Services at the Landmark Society of Western New York. If you are coming to us from the Cobbs Hill or surrounding neighborhood, we are somewhat of a neighbor down the road. Our office is in Highland Park. And tonight we're going to be sharing about the historic tax credits that homeowners are now eligible for within the almost completed Cobbs Hill Historic District, and you'll see what that is a little later. I do have a few housekeeping things I'd like to go over before we really get into the presentation, so just bear with me. First, as I mentioned, this webinar is being recorded. The plan is that this will be uploaded to the project website, which is landmarksociety.org/Cobbs-Hill. And you can go to that website and see all about the project that's going on that these tax credits are stemming from. So this will be recorded. If you want to watch it later or you have neighbors that couldn't attend tonight, I would tell you to direct them to that website. It will be up within the week. We also ask that you remain muted. Sometimes we get a lot of feedback during these presentations, so to make sure everybody can hear and gets to hear all the information, I just ask that you keep yourself muted during the presentation. You're also welcome to take yourself off video if you would like, but feel free to stay on. Then I also wanted to let you know we are going to do a question and answer at the end of the presentation. We often find that some of the questions are actually answered on the very next slide. So it's a little easier and it helps us keep things on task if we just get through the entire presentation and then do questions at the end. You'll find on the bottom of your screen, there should be a chat function. If you click on that, you can type your questions right into there. We do encourage you to put your questions in there. It makes it a little bit better streamlined at the end for us to be able to answer questions. So again, you can find that. You should be able to find that at the bottom of your screen. So do feel free to put questions in that chat during the presentation and we'll answer them at the very end. And then finally, sometimes we have technical difficulty. So if for some reason you do get kicked out of this presentation, please do rejoin through the same link that you used to get on, and we will work our hardest to get everyone back in quickly from the waiting room. So without further ado, we'll get started on the tax credit webinar. All right, if it's going to want to move forward for me. All right, there we go. So very quickly, just to let you know who the Landmark Society of Western New York is. We were founded in 1937, and we are a 501c3 nonprofit membership-based organization. We're located in the Warner Castle in Highland Park, is where our offices are. And we're a small staff, but we do quite a bit. So we do a lot of preservation advocacy as our main organizational mission. We also do preservation consulting, which includes writing National Register nominations, doing historic resource surveys, and helping homeowners and other property owners work through, figuring out what's going on with their buildings, connecting you with contractors that know how to work with historic buildings and materials, among lots of other consulting work. We also do a lot of educational programming. You may have heard about our Inside Downtown tour, which happens in the fall, and our House and Garden tour, which happens in June. So those are really fun opportunities to kind of get involved and see inside some of the places and spaces around Rochester. We also have historic properties. So we are located in the Warner Castle, but we also own Stone Tolan in Brighton and St. Joseph's Park downtown, as well as the Ellwanger Gardens on Mount Hope Avenue. And then we also have started up recently. We are now doing historic trades training and workshops. So you can be watching out for those if that's something you might be interested in. So we always like to start this out with a who is who in preservation so that you have a better idea of if and when you decide to use this tax credit program, a good idea of who it is that you're working with, who the different players are in the preservation field. So this is our handy dandy little guide on that. So we have local, state, and national levels, and then we have government and nonprofit sectors that play a role in different preservation projects. So when it comes to tax credits, which is what we'll be talking about tonight, the people who are part of that is administered by the State Historic Preservation Office, which is part of New York State Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation. So if you hear me talking about SHPO, SHPO, I'm talking about the State Historic Preservation Office. They are the ones that will be reviewing your tax credit projects as a homeowner. The rest of these people on here don't really play a role in the tax credit per se, although Landmark Society could potentially be hired to do your tax credit for you, which I'll share about later. But in working on these projects, to be eligible for the tax credit, you do have to be listed in a National Register Historic District or individually. And that's typically done in partnership with a municipality, so village, town, or city, or it can even be a neighborhood organization or group. The Landmark Society, that's who I work for, and we are a regional nonprofit organization, so we work across the 9-county region. Then on the state level, you have the State Historic Preservation Office, SHPO, and they are your government sector in this. And on the nonprofit side, we have our colleagues at the Preservation League of New York State, and they oversee, they're much like the Landmark Society, but they do advocacy work across the entire state of New York. And then at the national level, you have the National Park Service. They oversee the National Register program. They also oversee their own commercial tax credit program. And although we won't be talking about those tonight, if you do own a commercial property, please feel free to reach out to me later and I can share more about that program with you. And then on the nonprofit side, we have the National Trust for Historic Preservation, and they work on preservation advocacy across the nation. If you want to snap a picture of this slide or write down the information quick, I'll leave it up for just a second. The New York State Historic Homeownership Rehabilitation Tax Credit is what we'll be talking about tonight. And the reviewer for this program, if you were to submit an application, is Christina Vagvolgi. And you can see her number and her email there on the screen. You can also find her information and other staff contact information at parks.ny.gov/SHPO. So again, that's Christina Vagvolgi. She is absolutely wonderful to work with, and she is the reviewer for the homeowner tax credit program for Monroe County. All right, we'll jump right into the tax credit program. So this is the New York State Historic Homeownership Rehabilitation Tax Credit Program. This is a tax credit, not a deduction. So, and this is a credit off of your personal New York State income tax liability. So again, it's not a deduction, it is a tax credit that you would receive. Credits are worth 20% of your qualified rehabilitation expenses. We call those QREs, and we'll go over what some of those are a little bit later. We're actually going to get into the details on how to apply for the tax credit and what the application form looks like. So we'll walk through all of that during this presentation. The tax credit is not retroactive. So unfortunately, if you've already done work that would have been qualifying and it's completed, it is not eligible for the tax credit. So all of your work does have to be reviewed and approved by the State Historic Preservation Office prior to starting in order to be eligible. There are times when, if it's an emergency, such as the middle of winter and your boiler goes or your heater, whatever happens there, if you call up Christina and tell her what's going on, she often can help with a quick emergency approval to get you going much faster than usual. So again, your work does have to be approved by their office before you start in order for those expenses to become eligible for that 20% credit. And then you claim the credit when you file your New York State income tax return the following year. So after you complete your project, and we'll go into this a little bit later when I talk about that part of the application, but after you complete your project and it's been certified, signed off, approved by the SHPO office, that's when you would claim your tax credits in the year that they sign off on your final application. So this is just a slide showing you the tax credit project workflow, which is going to set up how we do the rest of this presentation. I'll talk about qualifying requirements in order to be eligible for this program. We'll assess your existing conditions, how you prioritize work, do it yourself versus hiring out a contractor, and then we'll walk through the application process itself with a final look at the form that you would use to claim your tax credit. So to start with, qualification requirements to be able to use the New York State Historic Homeownership Tax Credit Program. It does need to be an owner-occupied home. This can be your primary or a secondary residence. You just have to, if it's a secondary residence and you rent it out, it just can't be rented for over a certain percentage of the year, and that's something you would want to check with Christina if that is a case that you would be in. So again, it does need to be your owner-occupied home. This program cannot be used for rental properties. If you own the property and live in it, but also have a rental unit, you are eligible to use this program, but your credit is prorated on the percentage of the home that you personally live in. And then if you are doing exterior work, again, it's a percentage based on the percentage of the home that you actually live in. So let's say you live on the first floor, your second floor is a rental property, and you're doing exterior work, then if that's kind of 50-50% in square footage, your ownership versus the rental space, then the expenses for exterior work, 50% would be eligible to be claimed towards the credit. And if you have questions about that specifically, we can either talk further about that at the end, or you're always welcome to reach out to me individually later on, and I can walk you through a little bit more of those more nuanced situations. Your property does need to be a contributing structure in the National Register Historic District or individually listed on the National Register. In this case tonight, we are focusing this presentation on the Cobbs Hill neighborhood. And so just so that you are aware, although it is not listed yet, we are in a place with that nomination that homeowners can begin submitting tax credit applications, Part 1 and Part 2 tax credit applications. So you can begin that work now. And your homes will be contributing to a historic district. So that does make you eligible to use this program. You also have to be located within a qualifying census tract. Good news is, for everybody in the city of Rochester, you are all in a qualifying census tract, so you don't even have to worry about that. However, if you own a property somewhere else in the city or outside of the city, and you know it's in a historic district, you can always reach out to me to determine whether or not that district is in a qualifying census tract. There is a minimum of $5,000 that has to be spent in order to use this program. So if you're looking to have a new roof or refinishing your wood flooring inside, whatever all of those projects are that you want to do, whether it's one project or 10 projects, the total amount for all of those has to at least be $5,000 to be able to use this program. I think as homeowners, we all know that it's pretty easy to meet that minimum. And then within that $5,000 minimum or higher, whatever you're spending, a minimum of 5% of your total cost does have to be for exterior work. So that means if you're looking to use the tax credit program to do something like refinish your hardwood floors or repair plaster walls on the interior, you do need to find something on the exterior. Often, if you don't really have a lot to do, our suggestion is, maybe repaint something. Sometimes that little bit can get you to that 5% that you would need to have on the exterior. So just something to think about when you're planning your tax credit projects. Always make sure that you have something on the exterior happening. Again, as we mentioned before, work does need to be approved by SHPO before you begin. They can't backdate their approval for you. And then there is a 2-year recapture period. What this means is that, let's say you do a tax credit, you claim the tax credit, and then you sell the house, or you do something to the home that wouldn't meet preservation standards, which we'll talk about a little later. The state can recapture a portion of your credit based on when that happens. Now, I don't want to make that sound scary. That generally doesn't happen. And I would say, looking around your neighborhood, you are all doing a beautiful job taking care of your homes. And I can't imagine that there would be much done that would make this happen. I will also say the state does not have staff that just drives around making sure that you didn't do anything to your house. But do be aware of that recapture. It's really to make sure that people who are flipping homes aren't claiming this credit and then actually not living in the home. So this is just the next two slides actually are just a list of some of the other historic districts in the city of Rochester, just so you know that Cobbs Hill is not alone. There are many, many, many historic districts in the city of Rochester. The 19th Ward has several that you can see there on the screen, the Browncroft Historic District. There's the Cornhill or the 3rd Ward Historic District, East Avenue, Grove Place. There are 4 in the Highland Park area that were recently listed a few years ago. Park Avenue was listed a little bit more recently. The South Wedge has 2 districts actually, and then the Susan B. Anthony neighborhood is also listed. So this is just to give you an idea that there are a lot of property owners in the city of Rochester that are listed in the National Register. And this listing is honorary, so it doesn't, unless you choose to use this program that we're talking about tonight, nobody steps in and tells you what you can and can't do with your property because it's on the National Register. So how do you know if you're in a National Register district or are you in a qualifying census tract? To start with, again, because this webinar tonight is focused on the Cobbs Hill area, what you see on the screen now is the proposed district for this Cobbs Hill Historic District. As you can see, it encompasses basically everything from Culver Road, including Cobbs Hill Park, Washington Grove, Highland Heights, and the Cobbs Hill neighborhood. So basically everything from Culver Road moving east to 590, and then everything pretty much between, south of 490 all the way down to Highland Avenue, and that's the south side of Highland Avenue within the city is included in this district. So if your home is within that boundary, then you are likely eligible for the program. And I say likely because the only reason you wouldn't be is if your house is a more recent construction, meaning it is not 50 years old yet. The majority of homes in this boundary are 50 years old. So this is how you'll know if you live in the neighborhood, if you are eligible, if you're in the district. As long as you're within that boundary line, you're in the district. And as we mentioned before, you are in a qualifying census tract in the city of Rochester. However, if you're still unsure or you want to double check, you are welcome to contact me. Again, my name's Megan Hilliard, and my email is right there on the screen. It's mhilliard@landmarksociety.org. You can also reach out to the National Register Reviewer, who is Sarah Evanson, and her contact information is right there on the screen as well. And the other contact you have that we shared already is Christina Bagvolgi, who would be your tax credit reviewer. So there's 3 contacts there. You're always welcome to reach out to me, though. I'm happy to double check and make sure that you are within the historic district. All right, so now to talk about your qualifying rehabilitation expenses. I just want to point out that the list you see on the screen now is not an all-inclusive list. There's quite a bit that you could do with your home that would count towards this 20% tax credit. Your roof repair or replacement is eligible. Chimney repairs or restoration, so that's masonry work, repointing. If you have spalling bricks that are in pretty bad shape, getting new bricks that are best match and have them put in there, eligible expense. Porch repairs and restoration. Also, window and door repairs and restoration. I would say SHPO, because this is a preservation program, they're always going to encourage repair before you replace something. However, it doesn't mean that you can't replace. It would just have to be done with a material that is historically appropriate. And that doesn't always mean full wood windows. If you're going to replace wood windows, it just means something that looks like what you have now. Although I will point out at this point in the presentation that for the purpose of the homeowner tax credit program, SHPO does not approve of vinyl products. So if you're looking to put vinyl siding on your house, if it's wood sided now or some other historic material, or you're looking at vinyl windows, those materials are not approvable through this program. So you can always reach out to Christina, the reviewer, and talk to her about that, but it's very unlikely that you'll get vinyl products approved. Again, as I mentioned, masonry repointing and restoration, that can be for chimneys, your foundations, if you have a brick home. Also, painting, both interior and exterior painting is eligible. Floor restoration or replacement, if you have your historic wood floors and you need to have them refinished or a piece repaired, that cost is eligible towards this tax credit. Another one that people really love to use, and we've helped homeowners with applications that do this, are your kitchen and bath cabinets. So, and remodeling of those two spaces. So if you have a kitchen that you would like to modernize, or you just want to redo your kitchen and upgrade it, that is an eligible expense for the tax credit. So that's your cabinets, your backsplash, your countertops, flooring, if you're doing that. So your kitchen and bath remodels are eligible for this program. Also, mechanical systems. So your HVAC, your plumbing, your electrical. I know a lot of homes that were constructed during the time period that most of the homes were in the Cobbs Hill neighborhood. Air conditioning was not necessarily a thing yet. So if you don't have air conditioning in your home and you would like to have that installed, you could get a 20% tax credit for the cost of that. If you have plumbing repairs that need to be done, and that's everything that happens inside the house. Unfortunately, if it's a plumbing repair, like your sewer line between the house and the road, unfortunately, that is considered outside the footprint of the home and therefore is not eligible. And soft costs. So if you're working with, say, an architect who is helping you with a kitchen remodel and they have to do drawings, those costs are eligible for the tax credit as well. I like to tell people, think about your qualified expenses as if you were to flip your house upside down, what are the things that fall out? Those are probably not eligible. The things that stay in and attach to your home are most likely eligible expenses to work with. There's also qualified sustainability improvements. So things like solar panels. We do tell people to reach out to your tax credit reviewer, who is Christina Vagvolji, ahead of this. Typically, they will approve solar panels on your roof, but they're going to want them on a roof slope that is not easily seen from the public right of way. So likely the back roof slope if you have a side gable, or on the side slopes of the roof. They generally won't approve them right on the front of the house just because it really does alter the appearance of the historic home. Geothermal heating is also eligible. And I know you're probably thinking, I just said anything outside your home is not eligible. This is. And so if you were to have geothermal heating installed, the cost of the unit, which is usually buried underground outside, is eligible for the credit, as well as all the work they have to do on the interior to actually install it in your home. Your furnace, boiler, and water heater upgrades are all eligible. So if it's time for a new boiler or a new furnace, it's a great way to get 20% of a tax credit on that expense. Also, window efficiency upgrades, generally not replacement. Again, you can have window replacement approved by SHPO, and they will do that. But generally, what we mean by energy efficiency upgrades are things like having storm windows installed, which we highly encourage homeowners to do in order to keep their historic windows. And then also insulation. And you want to make sure that you maybe reach out to Christina ahead of submitting an application for insulation. Generally, something like spray foam insulation that hardens and you can't remove it without damaging your, like the rafters and and some of the other materials that sticks to, might not be a great option. But if you're looking to do blown-in insulation or rolled bat insulation, anything like that in your attic, your crawl spaces, or your walls, you could get a tax credit for that as well. So a few things that are not qualifying expenses, meaning you cannot get a 20% tax credit on these expenses. Acquisition costs, so if you're purchasing a home that's in a National Register district, the cost of the home, you can't claim that towards the tax credit. Contributing structures, so within the district, there are contributing structures like detached garages or other outbuildings. Unfortunately, the New York State homeowner program does not include those as eligible structures for the tax credit. I will say if you own a home with an attached garage, meaning it is physically attached to the main home, then you happen to be in luck. Your garage can count for any repair or maintenance work that you do to that. Unfortunately, and it's a shame because they are historic garages, but if your garage is completely detached from your house, meaning it's not connected in any way, unfortunately, work to the garage would not be eligible towards this credit. Other things like site improvements, so if you're doing driveway repairs, landscaping, fencing installation or repairs, those are not eligible for the tax credit. Again, the tax credit is only for things that are on the exterior of the home and the interior, so it has to be to the main house. Things like additions. Well, you can do an addition. People often think that that would just disqualify them from using the program. It doesn't. The state will want to review your plans, how it's being attached to your home, how you're getting into it from your existing home. While they'll want to review that, they do approve of that, and they would need to review it if you're doing that along with other tax credit eligible work. So additions, the cost is not eligible, but if it's ongoing while you're doing a tax credit project, the state does need to review it. And that's because all work has to comply with the preservation standards that we'll go over in a moment in order for you to be eligible for any tax credit. So again, you can do this work that doesn't qualify. It just needs to be reviewed in addition to. Also appliances. So I mentioned how your kitchen upgrades would be eligible for the tax credit. The only portion of that that wouldn't be are your appliances. So like your refrigerator, your oven, your microwave, those types of things. The thought behind why these aren't eligible is that while many people don't, you could actually take those with you if you were to ever move away from the house. So they don't become part of the house in the same way that like cabinets would. And then tools. So if you are going to be painting your house on your own, the cost, and we'll go over this a little bit later too, with DIY versus hiring out, but the cost of tools. So if you're painting your own house, the cost of drop cloths or paint brushes are not eligible. Again, the reason for that is the thought behind it is that you would be able to reuse those materials again, so they're not specifically for just this project. However, your paint is an eligible expense. Now, I will say if you hire out and you have a painter or a contractor painting your home, then it changes things a little because you would be paying just whatever your contractor's invoice is. So if that includes tools, it just is what it is. But if you're doing the work on your own, those tools are not eligible. You've heard me talk now about how the state would need to review your project to make sure it complies with the preservation standards. So these are called the Secretary of the Interior Standards for Rehabilitation. And what these are a set of 10 guidelines created by the National Park Service to guide the sensitive rehab of historic buildings. So all work, if you're using this tax credit program, does need to comply with the standards. Again, as I mentioned, while you could do an addition to your home, if that addition is coming off the front of your house and completely altering what your historic home looks like, or a side addition or an addition that just overwhelms and is taller than or larger than your historic portion of your home, they probably won't approve it, which means you couldn't be approved for any work for the tax credit, even other eligible work. So just be aware of that. But the reviewers are always happy to work through things with you. So they don't always deny right away. Often they'll come back and say, hey, this doesn't really comply with the standards. Can we work through and find a solution for you to get you in compliance? The general principles behind the standards are that, first of all, that you would retain your architectural features and materials. The reason we encourage you to retain these materials is because that's what made your property historically significant and unique to be listed in the National Register to begin with. And so if we start losing all of those, the historic integrity of your home diminishes with that. The other would be to repair rather than replace. So again, if you have, historic windows that are, need to be repainted, or there's some, broken wood pieces on it, historic windows are pretty easily repairable. And there are people in the city of Rochester who do repair windows like that. So you always want to try to repair your materials before you go to replacement. However, if you do need to replace, the standards do say that you should replace in kind. Now, generally that means with like material and that it would match. I'm going to use windows again for an example on this one, although this could really take shape with any material, but windows are usually the big question, which is why I use it as an example here. So if you have historic wood windows in your home, and for some reason they are determined beyond repair and SHPO is going to approve replacement, your replacement windows generally would need to be done in either a wood window, a wood-clad aluminum window, or even fiberglass windows often are approved through this program as being acceptable, historically appropriate materials. Also, if you're replacing a window, if you have like a 6/1 window, and what I mean by that, if you don't know, is if your upper sash of your window has 6 lights, so it's got the wood dividers. If it has like 6 lights or 4 lights, whatever that is, it might even just be one with no divisions. It'd be a 6/1 or a 1/1 window. Your replacement window should match that configuration. And you also want to try to match the profile of the window as best you can. There are companies out there like Pella and Rochester Colonial and other window companies who do have windows that are generally approved through this program for replacement. So just be aware of that. And if you have questions on that, I'm always happy to try to give you guidance as well. So you can reach out to me on that. But again, when necessary, this also plays into things like your siding. If you have the historic wood siding or another siding material, if you are going to propose to vinyl side your house, that would not be approved this program. Again, vinyl materials are not approvable through the program, so they also wouldn't approve vinyl windows. And the reason for that is, while they are considered quote unquote maintenance free, if any portion of that window were to break, generally you have to replace the whole window again. They're not really repairable. So your wood windows, you're a lot better off with those and just more economically viable materials. So where do you start when you look at your home and wanting to use the tax credit program? The first thing you want to do is assess your existing conditions. And I'm just going to look here. So pretty much what you want to do is take a look at the whole house and figure out, what needs to be done first. A lot of people they just don't know where to start. And so what we generally say, and I'm just making sure that I'm not jumping ahead of myself here, is you want to prioritize your work. So prioritizing your work means what can wait and what can't wait. We always recommend that you start with looking at the structural stabilization, so life and safety of your property. If you have something going on like a major bulge in the wall or your foundation is crumbling, those are probably things that you want to address first. They're probably also the most expensive things you're going to address. But you always want to make sure that your home is structurally sound first and foremost. Then the second thing you would look at is weather tightness. So is there water coming into your house from anywhere? You want to make sure that your roof is in good condition, that your eaves, your gutters are working, and that generally, your siding is tight to the house, and those types of things. You want to avoid water infiltration in your home. This also plays into your foundations. Making sure that your landscaping in the ground is grading away from your foundation rather than into it, which will just pour water into your basement. So looking at weather and water tightness. Then you want to look at design deficiencies that might be causing damage. We find sometimes that although historic homes generally have really good bones and they were built to last, there can be some design deficiencies that might be causing issues with your home. So you'd want to take care of those as well. Then active deterioration of materials and finishes. So if you have paint that is chipping, or you have spalling bricks on your foundation, whatever that might be, you do want to address those next. And then, kind of your exterior envelope repairs, making sure the whole outside of your house is weather tight, it's in good condition, making sure that things like water infiltration can't happen. Then, we always recommend looking at your mechanical systems, maintenance and replacement on those. So these are all kind of your big ticket items. The thing that we always put last on our list, and we say that's because these are wants, not needs, are your cosmetic improvements. So that's things like, a new kitchen or a new bathroom. Of course, if you're having plumbing issues, take care of those, but take care of the plumbing issue first. I'm going to show you on the next slide what we mean by kind of taking care of things, prioritizing the work items with an actual example. So this is a colleague of mine's home, and you can see they've got some pretty major ice dams and icicles happening in the winter. And so, these were causing some major issues. You'll see here on the left-hand side, that's where water infiltration was causing some significant plaster damage in one of the rooms that's in the corner there. And so a lot of people would think the first thing I need to do is take care of the plaster that's, quite literally falling off the wall because of water behind it. However, what you really need to do is take care of the roof issue first, because if you don't take care of the point of entry of the water, it won't really matter how many times you repair that plaster wall. It's going to keep doing the same thing, and it's not going to hold paint. So you can see in these other photos here, obviously they had a pretty major project here in order to try and deal with the ice damming that was happening on their roof. Of course, they wanted the room inside to look nice, but that really was secondary to taking care of the issue that was causing that interior damage to the plaster, because their roof was damaged. This is another example of an eligible project, just kind of looking at what's going on. They took care of this again before they took care of that interior wall situation with painting and doing plaster work. Again, trying to just tighten up the exterior of the home. So this is a back porch, and one of the piers that holds up the porch and supports it was starting to lean out and give way. Some of the wood features were actually rotting on the porch. And so they did a project to repair the porch instead of before they moved to their interior work. So again, on this porch here, they were able to do like wood epoxies to fill in where it was rotting. They actually supported this porch from the back and were able to have the piers rebuilt and new footers put in. So again, structural stability of the house. This porch is attached into the home. So if the porch falls, it does some pretty big damage to the back wall of the house. So that kind of gives you an idea of how to prioritize what you're looking at doing, making sure that you're taking care of the things, the exterior first, the big impact items before you start doing cosmetic changes, which is perfectly fine to do cosmetic changes to your home. We're not at all advocating for not doing that. Just make sure that you take care of, major issues first. So the people often call us and say, should I do this myself or should I hire the work out? And so there's donated labor versus paid labor. So donated labor, sometimes we consider that you as the homeowner doing the labor yourself versus paying a contractor to do it. And how do you make sure that your contractor and you are doing the work correctly? And what are some of the sources? And then who do you hire? How do you complete the work? And how do you budget for that work? So we'll go over some of that right now. So making sure that you're doing the work right, and we put that in quotes, that's just making sure that the work that is done is treating the historic materials appropriately. There's a difference between historic materials and more modern materials, which is why we always encourage people to work with contractors who have experience with historic properties. and materials, just because, there are certain things you can do, like masonry work. Using all Portland cement on a historic brick home would be very problematic. Your Portland cement is too hard and your historic brick is actually softer. So as your house moves, because our homes naturally shift, my house does, what will happen is if you use a mortar that's inappropriate for your softer historic brick, is it will actually break the brick and your mortar will stay in place. When you want the opposite, you want your mortar to be the sacrificial material. So making sure that you're working with like a mason who knows that and isn't going to repoint your whole house with Portland cement. Resources for doing it right. The National Park Service, again, if you think back to that chart, that's the government side down at the national level. So the National Park Service wrote these things that are called the preservation briefs. And I think now they're up to 52 of these briefs. They touch on all kinds of topics across from ones that you see here on the screen, from the repair and thermal upgrading of your historic steel windows. There's one on wood windows. The next one you see here is for repointing mortar joints in historic buildings. So it kind of talks through what I was just mentioning about, how you need to use an appropriate mortar mix. And they also include tech notes to kind of help walk you through things. As I mentioned, I believe there's 52 of these now, all on different topics. It's a really great resource. Some of them I would say are a little older, but the information within is still absolutely accurate and helpful. So if you are working with a contractor who maybe isn't as experienced with historic buildings, it might be that you and your contractor want to take a look at these briefs and look through those. And if you go onto the National Park Service's website, or even just Google National Park Service preservation briefs, you'll find the link to these right away. And very helpful source. The other resources, some other ones that you can use, is Old House Journal is always a great one. Old House Journal, I think you can access this online too, but there's always really great articles in there about, DIY, how to do certain work to your home, how to work with contractors. So that's a really good resource as well. The other two that you see on the screen here are actually both books written by Steve Jordan. If you have not heard of him, he is actually a local here in Rochester who is a window expert. He's known kind of nationally as kind of the window guy. He wrote what you see on the right there, the Window Sash Bible, several years ago, and it's a guide to maintaining and restoring your old windows. It's a really great source for talking about, repair versus replacement of your historic windows. He also wrote, and this just came out last year with the Landmark Society, the Historic House Handbook, which is a sensitive guide for old house living. This is a really good resource if you just want general guidance and information on a whole plethora of topics of how to maintain your historic property and who you should reach out to and who can help with things. That book you can purchase that book through the Landmark Society. Steve's Window Sash Bible, you can also find on Amazon. But those are two really good resources as well. There's a lot of other resources I should mention too that if you reach out to me, that is part of what I do at the Landmark Society, is try to assist homeowners getting you connected with the right resources, the right contractors. So who do you hire to do this work? You can do work on your own, especially if it's something that doesn't require a lot of expertise or skill. Hey, go for it, DIY that. But, often you might want to work with a contractor, you might need an architect. So, looking through, we talked about assessing the conditions of your home and kind of prioritizing the work items that need to be done. You could always work with an architect who can come out and assess your home and provide you with a building condition assessment. And what that does is it will kind of lay out everything that needs to be done on your home, and they basically prioritize the work for you and lay out, how soon does this really need to be done? Working with an architect that has experience rehabilitating historic homes and buildings is always something that the Landmark Society recommends. And architects work with contractors all the time. So often if you're working with a really good architect, they'll have really good contractors that they can bring in to do the actual work. The other nice thing about working with an architect or a general contractor that they recommend is that you as the homeowner don't necessarily have to be your own general contractor overseeing the work. They can do that for you and make sure that it's being done right. However, I always say advocate for yourself as well as the homeowner. The other thing you can do is submit a contractor request form. That will come to the Landmark Society. We have a contractor referral program where we keep a list of contractors under all kinds of categories like window repair, masons, architects, structural engineers, floor refinishers, you name it, we may have somebody for that. So if you go to landmarksociety.org/contractors, you would put in your requests there. Just let us know the address of your property, and these will all be input right on the form that you have. And then the work that you're looking to do, those requests actually all come to me, but we do ask that you submit it through this form. And I will get back to you as quickly as I possibly can. We surprisingly actually do get a lot of requests. But what I do is I try to fit you with the best possible contractor for the specific project that you're working on. So for example, if you are going to submit because you need help with your foundation, if you include what the foundation material is, that sometimes helps me as well, because believe it or not, even within the world of masonry, there are masons who really specialize more with brick, others that might specialize more with stone. So the more information you can give, the better. And it just helps us really connect you with the right people. You can also talk to a neighbor or a friend or a family member that owns a historic building and whose opinion you trust. They may have worked with contractors in the past who they will recommend to you. But we do want to say, just know that working with a qualified contractor, it's not often the cheapest, and that's because they have a specialized skill working with historic materials. And often they've got a waiting list. So just be aware that if you contact them, they're not necessarily going to be able to show up at your house tomorrow or next week. There may be a months-long waiting list. So just be prepared for that. It doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing if a contractor can come out tomorrow. That's great. But just be aware that if you're working with a really specialized contractor in the historic trades, they may have a wait list. All right. Now I'm going to run you through the application process. And I know we're coming up quickly, and I still want to leave time for question and answer, but this is going to be maybe one of the most important parts of this presentation. So we start with the Part 1 and Part 2 tax credit application. On your screen now, what you can see is the actual application form itself, an example of this. What you fill out, Part 1 and Part 2 is actually the same application form, so it goes in together. Part 1 generally is just giving information about your property address. You'll talk about the historic district your property is in. Not talk about, you just have to write what historic district it's in. Are you located in a qualifying census tract? Well, if you're in the Cobbs Hill area, then that answer is yes. Are your project expenditures a minimum of $5,000? Obviously, you want to say yes to that, or you're not eligible for the program. And just giving your contact information. Then the Part 2 is more of you're explaining the work that you're going to do. So this is what the Part 2 application looks like. And with this, you would have to take photographs of the area that you're going to do work in. So what the state requires is a photo of each exterior elevation or side of your home, just because that helps them see what your house looks like, the architectural style. It will help them determine appropriate work to your house. In addition to those pretty much 4 exterior photos that you need to have showing the whole outside of the house, you would include some photographs that are specifically dealing with the area that you are applying for work for. So for example, if you're just applying to have the exterior of your home painted, then those 4 required photos will handle that. And then you also are doing a furnace replacement. You would just take a picture of the area your furnace is in, and it can be just basically of your furnace. So you don't have to show them your whole basement. And you would submit those with this form. So you would put the photo number in. You're going to number all of your photos, and this is all in the instructions. So it's pretty easy to follow along with the instructions that they give you. You would title the work. So for example, exterior painting. Then you would put in the existing condition. You could just say exterior paint is failing or exterior paint is flaking, whatever that is. It could even just be that you want a new color of paint on your house, and that is still eligible for the tax credit. There doesn't have to be anything wrong with it. Then you would give a description of the proposed work. So in this case, you're going to scrape, prep, and repaint the exterior of your home. It's that simple. You don't have to write anything else. If you were going to be doing a roof replacement, you could say the existing condition is that the existing roof is beyond its useful life. The proposed work that you're replacing the roof with, and then whatever that material is that you're replacing it with. Often you don't even really need to tell them what color it is that you're using. Like, let's say, I'm just going to pick a roof, GAF Timberline. If you're using that, you don't even have to tell them which color you're choosing. You can, but you're not required to. Then you would put in an estimated cost. So this is important. At the part 2, you don't have to have your exact cost yet. They just want to make sure that you have an idea of what it's going to cost. So it is a good idea to have worked with a contractor already, or have at least an estimate in hand that you can include there. I'll be honest, sometimes that's really just the state trying to make sure that your contractor is not trying to overcharge you for something, or that you really know that you are going to meet that $5,000 minimum if you're doing really small projects. So you would put that in that final column, and then down at the bottom, you can see where you total up your total estimated cost, and that just needs to be $5,000 or more. So this is an example of that page filled out. And as you can see, there aren't like paragraphs and paragraphs written about what you're doing. Now, if you're doing something a lot more complicated, if you're changing layouts of your interior or doing something a lot more complicated like that, it might take a few of these lines. You might have to do a few rows to explain what you're doing. But generally, it's a pretty straightforward, easy description of what you're doing. And often you can pull this information right off your contractor's estimate if you have one. And the approval and Part 2 amendments. This is what the approval of your Part 1 and 2 will look like. You'll get a letter from the state, and they will have signed off on it. Once you have this from them, that means you are good to start your work. And as you can see here, this one was for the repair of stained glass panel in their rear door. And obviously you can see the estimated cost of $600 would not get them eligible. So this was part of a larger project, because what you're seeing here is an amendment form. So once your Part 2 is approved, you've started work, you decide, you know what, there's something else I wanted to add and it's not on my Part 2. How do I do that? You have this amendment form. So you just simply fill out that new work item that you want to add to your tax credit project, and you submit that to the state for review and approval. Again, they do need to sign off on this new work before you start that. But this is so that you can keep adding. You can submit as many amendments as you need to if you just keep thinking of things that you'd like to add. People often ask, how much can I include on my Part 2? And we often say, think about the things that you want to do in the next 2 to 5 years and just include it all. Include it all in your Part 2 or on the amendments. It's better to just get it approved up front. You don't necessarily have to complete it all. There's no repercussions if you don't complete it all. But that way, it kind of makes it easier for you as the homeowner to just continuously keep rolling through these projects, rather than having to stop and start waiting for approvals from the state. So that is what that would look like, is an amendment form. You just add additional work to your already approved Part 2. So as you're working through your approved projects, you want to make sure that you save your contractor estimates. And if you're completing DIY work, save your receipts or document your expenditures for materials. And remember, your labor as the homeowner and tools do not count into that expense. And you want to save all of your final invoices for your work completed. And that includes professional fees of an architect or an engineer that's involved. So if you do have one of those bigger projects that pulls in a professional like that, the cost to have them do their work is eligible towards that 20% tax credit. We recommend photographing the work while it's in progress. What the state really wants to see is when it's completed. And so this is preparing you for the final application. And then we always say you kind of want to target a work completion date of November 1st. And the reason for that is because you would submit your Part 3 application, which is your final completed work application, by December 1st. Now, looking at that, that is not a hard and fast deadline. That is not a requirement. However, the state does say that they recommend submitting your Part 3 by December 1st in the year that you would like to claim the credit. And that's because you have to claim the credit for the year in which their signature goes on your Part 3 approving that work. So let's say that you get your Part 2 approved in April and you complete work in November, but you never submit your Part 3 until February of 2027. The state's going to then sign your Part 3 in February of 2027, meaning you couldn't claim taxes, that tax credit, until 2027. So hopefully that makes sense. If you submit by December 1st of the year that you want to claim the credit, then they pretty much guarantee that they'll get to your review and sign off on it. The state does say that there is about a 30-day review period for a tax credit application. That's for the Part 1 and 2 and for the Part 3. So do just be prepared that it could take 30 days. I'll be honest, Christina, it moves pretty quickly, and we've seen approvals within a week, 2 weeks. So just know it can come quickly, but just be prepared for that approximate 30-day review period. So if you don't submit your Part 3 by December 1st of the year that you want to claim the credit, there's a chance that it won't be certified, their signature on it, until the following year, which would mean you'd have to wait another year to claim that credit. This is what your Part 3 looks like. It's pretty similar to your Part 2. In this case, again, you're just putting your owner information on one side. And then on the other side there, you can see it's just a short description of your completed work. So what did you do? If you upgraded your kitchen, you can just say new cabinets, new countertops. It kind of follows along with what you're describing of the work that you're going to do in your Part 2. And it should align because that's the work they approved you to do. The difference here is with the cost that you're going to input. You want to input the exact cost of that project. So if your estimate you got from a contractor was for, $2,000, but in the end you actually paid $2,300.67, you can put that in the final cost. You want it to be whatever it is that you actually spent. If it's less than what you estimated, you need to put in your actual cost on your Part 3. Now, you do not need to submit any financial documentation here, so you don't need to submit your contractor's final invoice. You don't need to submit any proof of you paying that invoice, but you do want to keep all that documentation because if you are ever audited or the state asks, you want to be able to show that what you claimed on this tax credit truly is what you could claim on the tax credit. So just be aware of that. So, don't make up your final costs and add to it just to get a bigger tax credit, because that could come back at you. But pretty simple. You can see the application here. There's not a lot of information that they're asking for. Again, your Part 3 would be submitted with photographs of the completed work so they can make sure that you actually did it and that it is what they approved you to do. And then finally, your final approval and taxes. How this tax credit works is it's a credit to your New York State income tax liability. So if your credit that you're getting back, that 20% on your eligible expenses, is more than your tax liability for the year that you're claiming the credit, then your credit would just be carried over year to year until you've used it all. So you're not going to lose your credit. So you just carry it over year to year until you've used it all. I will point out that I am not a tax attorney, so I can't provide you with financial or tax advice. We do encourage you to reach out to your financial professional, your tax attorney, your accountant, if you have tax or finance related questions and how this will work with your personal tax situations. So just do be aware of that if you have a more complicated tax situation or you're not sure how this works for you, do reach out to your accountant to discuss those. Unfortunately, I'm not a tax expert, so I won't be able to help you with that. But again, you would claim the tax credit in the year that your Part 3 is certified, signed off on by SHPO. And then this is what you'll get. You'll get this application form for the Part 3. This is them certifying that your Part 3 was good to go. You did what you said you were going to. They approve it. You get this signed off letter. What the little bit of tax advice I can give you is, what form do you fill out to claim your credit? It's called the IT 237. It's for claiming the historic homeownership rehabilitation tax credit. And you can find this online, or your tax accountant would be able to provide this for you, or just have it to fill out for you. So that is the form that you will fill out to actually claim this credit on your taxes. Or another option, if all of this sounds just horrible and you don't want to deal with the application process, but you want to use the program, you can hire the Landmark Society to prepare your tax credit application for you. What that would look like, and this is something that I've been doing for several years. I actually used to be a tax credit reviewer for the state of Maryland. And so I'm very well acquainted with the tax credit programs. If you wanted to hire the Landmark Society, you would just reach out to me. And we will talk through what the projects are that you're looking to do. I would come out and do a site visit with you just to make sure that it's appropriate work and I understand fully what you're doing. And then I would complete that application on your behalf and work with you to do that. So that is an option. Just be aware that because I am only one person, I might not be able to come out right tomorrow to do a tax credit application for you. So just be prepared that there could be a wait on that as well. But I'm happy to discuss that with you and to do site visits to come out and help you figure out what it is you're trying to do with your home. I can also just provide general advice, even if you are doing your own application. If you just need some advice, you're welcome to reach out to me anytime. You can also reach out again to Christina Vagvolgi, who is the reviewer for this program. I have had many people tell me that they've called her and she walked them through filling out their application. So she is a really, really wonderful resource. So never be afraid to call your state reviewer because she's really good. You can visit landmarksociety.org/old house help, and it kind of walks through some of the other ways that I'd be able to help you as a homeowner with things like connecting you to contractors again, or helping you with your tax credit application, or even just doing a site visit or talking to you about what some of the issues are at your house and what the best course of action might be, or who you should reach out to help you further with that. Please, I'm here as a resource, so please use the Landmark Society as that. And if we can't answer your question, we will get you in touch with someone who can. And I also want to quickly mention that with the tax credit program, we had a very generous scholarship program from Esther Krakauer, who is a local realtor. She's provided a scholarship that would cover the cost of the Landmark Society to do your tax credit for you. So that would be our consulting fee would be covered. This is available to homeowners located in National Register districts in the city of Rochester. So again, if you're looking at it for your home in Cobbs Hill, that's great. If you are outside of Rochester, unfortunately, this program would not be eligible for you. It's available to homeowners with a financial need. So you'd have to have a single income household of $50,000 or a dual income household of $90,000 or less to be eligible for this. I do like to make sure people are aware of it, just so that if that is your situation, do know that you can fill out this application. You can find that again at landmarksociety.org/old house help. Or you're welcome to reach out to me and I can send that application to you. And again, it's a one-page application that you really just give us some minimal information to make sure that you are eligible for that scholarship program. And then we move forward with you from there with the process I talked about before, putting together site visit and all of that. So if this is you and you're interested in that, again, this scholarship would cover the cost of Landmark Society fees to do your tax credit application. So that I know was a lot of information, but I am happy to take questions now. What I'm going to do is write down my email there if you want to, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen in just a moment so we can bring people on and we'll answer some questions. Again, if you do have questions, it's a lot easier for us to kind of filter through them and answer them if you can type them into the Q&A chat feature down at the bottom of your screen. But I'm happy to answer any questions. So let me stop sharing. All right, and we will now take a look at questions you might have. I'm going to bring up, let me find here if we have any. I don't see any questions in the chat yet. So if you have any questions, please feel free to put those in. Or if you're not sure how to do that, if you would like to unmute and ask your question, I'm happy to do it that way as well. All right, I do see a question here. What is the time constraint for additional amendments after the initial approval? So that's a great question, and it also means that I left out a little bit of information on that part too. So, and this ties into your question, so bear with me. Once you submit that part two and you have the approval, you can take as long as you need to get work completed. There is a 24-month period in which you have to claim eligible expenses, but you can take that full 2 years to do that. So once you submit your part two and you have an approval and you figure out there's something else I want to add, and so you want to submit an amendment, that can happen at any time during that period. You could realize 8 months later that you want to add a project in. So there really is no timetable on that amendment. The only thing to be aware of is once you submit your part three application and that's approved, that completely closes out that tax credit project. Even if you have more work that was approved that you didn't do as part of that project, you would have to submit a new part two application in order to reopen a new tax credit project. So just be aware of that you can submit an amendment whenever you want, as long as your part three has not been approved. Once that happens, it completely closes that out. All approvals that were happening on your part two, your amendments, closes all of that out, and you would have to resubmit on a new part two to open a new project. So I hope that answers your question. Any others? And again, feel free, if it's easier to just unmute and ask, you're welcome to do that. And if you just can't think of any questions right now, you have my contact information, you have Christina's. You can reach out to either of us at any time. Again, Christina Vagvolgi works for the State Historic Preservation Office, so she is the one who would actually be reviewing your tax credit application. I work at the Landmark Society, and so we are your regional advocacy organization here to help and connect you with people. All right, I've got another question here. It says, I live on a hill on Beckworth Terrace. My front door is 18 steps from the street, approaching 70, and thought I read somewhere it covers elevators. Is that correct? That is a really good question, and I have not worked with a homeowner yet who's installed an elevator. However, because an elevator would become part of your home, and I don't think it would be easily removable, if it were installed in a way that doesn't cause significant damage to the interior of your home, I would say that your elevator probably would be an eligible expense, but I would definitely reach out to Christina to double check that. If you're meaning on the exterior of your home, I would say I would definitely recommend you reach out to Christina on this question. If it were like a lift elevator on the outside of your home that's kind of next to the steps, I'd be curious to know if that would be an eligible expense as like another way to get into your home, because your steps, like if it was steps on your porch to repair, those would be eligible. So yeah, I'd be curious to know if an exterior elevator would be something, or a lift would be something that would be an eligible expense. Robert, I'm going to say definitely reach out to Christina to ask her that question for sure. All right, I've got another question here. Please explain the 24-month period. So when you are working on your tax credit work, generally you have a 24-month period to do your work. Now you can leave your application open for as long as you need to and just keep adding work to it. But you have that, yes, but you have 24 months that you can claim these eligible expenses. Although I think the homeowner program now does allow you to leave it open and keep adding further than that 24-month period. So I can check in on that for sure. And get back to you if you reach out to, if you want to send me an email, I can double check on that for you. But I know people have left their applications open for several years and just keep adding work to it as they go and then close out after like 5 years. So I do think that it is possible to be able to be doing work during that whole period, and I'll claim it all on one Part 3 application. Any other? What is the aging limit for projects? And Mark, I'm going to ask, what do you mean by the aging limit for projects? And you're welcome to unmute if you want to and ask.
Yeah, I guess what I'm asking is, on Part 1 and 2, as I understood it, you can list projects for 3 to 5 years. Is that correct? So there's no limit. So once it's been submitted, there's no limit to when you have to have it done?
Correct. Yes. Okay. Thanks. Now I understand what you're asking.
Sure.
Yes. So once you've submitted your Part 2, you don't have to have that work done. You're not required to have that work done within a specific time period. So for example, if you submitted a bunch of work that you think you might want to do in the next 2 to 5 years, and that includes like roof replacement, exterior painting, porch repair, interior floor refinishing, and interior painting. Let's say you do the interior floor repair, you do the interior painting, you replace your roof, but you don't get to your porch or the exterior painting. That's fine. You can still submit your Part 3 for those other things, and then open up a new application later for those other projects that you did not get to. You do not have to complete all of the work that you put on a Part 2 or in your amendments.
When you say open up another application, say you have 3 things on the list that you plan to do in the next 5 years, say 5 things, 5 years. You complete 3 and you want to, and you file Part 3 for those 3. Do you have to reapply for the 2 that you have not done?
Yes. So once you submit your Part 3 and it's approved by the state, it completely closes out your entire tax credit project. So in order to be eligible for the other work, although it was already approved as part of your previous Part 2, you do have to submit a new Part 2 application with that work on there. What I do sometimes when I'm helping homeowners and they do this, I will write what the work is, but then I'll put a little note in there that it was approved as part of application. They'll give you an application number, and I would just put that right in there. And that kind of helps Christina know, oh, I've already approved this. So it helps move the process through a little quicker sometimes. Yeah, but you do have to submit a new Part 2, wait for their approval, and then go on. Basically, once you submit that Part 3 application, they certify the Part 3. You can kind of think of it as the approval for anything you didn't complete is now gone. There is no approval anymore, is how I kind of think of it. And you have to restart that again with a new Part 2 application.
Okay. Thanks, Megan.
Yeah. And by the way, with the homeowner program, I will add on top of that, you can apply for this program as many times as you want over and over. You only ever have one Part 2 and any amendments attached to it open at a time. So again, once you submit the Part 3, if you want to do the tax credit program again, you would submit a new Part 2 and that opens a new project. But you could keep doing this over and over. I know people who they like every 2 years they have a lot of work that they're doing on their homes. They just keep opening up a new application and claiming the tax credit, closes that out, submit a new project, open up a new project. They do that, then they close that out and claim that tax credit. And often the reason that people will do that kind of on a rolling basis is that the credit that they get from the work that they have completed often helps them be able to do the next step of work. So, you're not spending all that money at once. But do remember that every time you start a new Part 2 application, there does have to be 5% of your total expenses for something on the exterior.
Thank you.
One more. So the question here is, when you submit an amendment, does the 5% exterior requirement apply to the new total, original application plus amendment of the application? Yes. So ultimately, where this really matters is your Part 3 application. When you submit your Part 3, whatever your total expenses that you're claiming, 5% of that does have to be for exterior work. So it includes your original Part 2 and any amendments that you've submitted. Any other questions? I don't think I've missed any yet in the chat here. Well, you've been with me for a little over an hour now, so I really do appreciate all of you attending tonight. I hope that this program is exciting to you as we work through the final stages of the National Register program. As I mentioned, you are eligible now to begin submitting your Part 1 and 2 applications. Your Part 3, if you're part of the Cobbs Hill Historic District that's in progress now, your Part 3 cannot be submitted until the nomination is officially designated, and that's in the state register, actually, because this program is tied to the state register, which should be happening in June. So as of June of this year, you should be able to start submitting your Part 3 applications, meaning you could potentially claim a tax credit for approved work this year for 2026. All right, if there are no other questions, again, feel free to reach out to myself or directly to Christina, the reviewer, at any time. And I'm here to help you and connect you with contractors or provide you guidance and advice. And so thank you very much for spending your evening with us. Again, this is being recorded, so within the next week, we'll have this up on the project website. And we hope that you have a great evening. Thank you, everyone.